Futu? Oh
Um,
my,
yeah,
So,
am
following
personally,
I,
tales of another
I do
adventure,
use the
eh?
same word,
This
fucker,
adventure,
motherfucker.
ha!
am
Yeah.
I,
Only for
am I,
quiet.
was I
No,
close, Emmy?
only this. For my kind pleasure.
Uh,
Any other
foot.
questions for Zadaf?
But you know, fact,
Any other questions for
it's
Zadafa?
like
Confident.
foutu, fook, foot.
I'm coming.
But
I'm coming
fucker
anyway.
doesn't have
Just,
any
just.
translation to
So
it.
you,
So
you
use
Like,
found our fellow
fucker in
tribe, the
French.
ancient
We do.
Argonians.
so, hmm.
I'm glad you asked. Our flex, a
It's not
yellow
the kind of
horse,
language
scattered all over
training I was expecting.
out in the marsh. I'm afraid. I sent a.
Yeah, it's always a good idea to start with insults first.
Always.
Follow me. If
Hold
you
on,
accept
I'm gonna
it,
see
I'll
if I
find
try.
you at the next
I mean,
stop. All right?
I hope I get this right. Foot Bujan.
What did I ever do wrong?
Jad, Jad, your honeymoon's not going so well, I don't think.
Amazing, but yeah.
I can't speak in.
That's great.
Oh my God. So,
I think
Emmy, Emmy,
we need to
Emmy,
change the name of that channel and call it Party Boy.
yeah, Emmy, Emmy and Jad got married, Tess, and I'm supposed to be the best
Aww,
man.
Yeah, you were the best man.
that's so cute.
A sheriff's bag.
I'm gonna
And
Maybe
then
stab
she'll
Jad
stop
now.
by one of these
and
centers.
then after
Keep an eye
and
out.
then after the honeymooning and all that, then Isa gets to spank Jad, and then Emmy will follow.
Oh, there's more involved in the honeymoon than just the two.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Come
It's
join it.
Yeah, there's a giant spiked paddle. Yeah, no merci.
I mean, Jad's ass is gonna look like a strawberry after this. It'll just look like a strawberry.
Not a tomato? Well, I
No,
guess
because
it flags.
of
Yeah,
no, because you'll have so many stud marks
yeah.
because of those paddles.
Oh my
That's
god. Oh my god, that's so funny. I'm like blushing for everybody here right
Reach
now and
tiniest sword.
laughing. Like
That's
Emmy's not talking. I'm assuming that
she's dying over
she's
there.
and
probably
then
she's out
one
of breath
day,
by
My
now.
Emmy
Tess
is
will
trying
come.
to breathe. Breathe and
Really. I'm
Oh my
just crying now.
okay, so now here's my next question. How do I say asshole?
god.
Trou de cul. Trou. Cul.
Whoa, what is he doing here on his own?
Tell him. Trou de cul.
Type Emmy for group. Tess.
Huh. I'm not there and you choose my name?
Are you
I'll
online,
probably
Tess?
I'll probably join you guys another night. I just wanted to check on everyone, make sure
Oh,
everyone's
okay.
good. I'm gonna
Zukas
go
hasn't
cook
arrived
dinner.
yet.
Making
Diana
veggie
hasn't either.
burgers tonight.
Oh, sounds
We
good.
should look
Yeah.
around.
No triple chocolate
This
cake?
should be along shore.
No, one
Mm,
day
sounds
is
Most
good.
enough.
Indians aren't really known for
That's
their
like crazy
Yeah.
enough otherwise.
Could you believe
A
it,
sheriff's
Chad?
journal
She
or
does
another story.
didn't share a piece
This
with
doesn't look
us.
good at all.
Hey,
Eh,
I told
The
you to
hell,
come over,
Tess?
lady. I told you to come over.
Zukas, is that you?
Sun's blessings, friend
I have
Fafnir.
wine.
by
I
the
have
time
Wait to
I,
cake.
learn.
Jed
I
has the
get
wrong
it.
horse. How dare him?
Greetings, Biko, and welcome to Murkmirin.
Oh,
My name is Sukas.
look
I
at
am
Jad.
loyal. Who are you? Forgive the
Do
rushed
you have
introduction.
all the three
I
of you
find
the
it then
same
this Rockastone belongs to
costume?
you.
Mm-hmm.
The same. Oh my.
Yeah.
Never tires of poking around in the old hard tasks.
Dad just needs to
I
change
do
his
not know
horse to be
why,
with us.
but very few
Mhm.
dry skin habits
Yeah.
make sense to me.
Get
You
on that
know,
pink
It
horse,
sounds like
Dad.
I
very
would like to do
dangerous.
it
Do
one
you have
night.
a guide?
Go all together, check the
Oh,
house
there we go.
No. Truthfully,
with
there is
same
nothing in this area that
costume
interests
or
me.
outfit.
I
Like,
hope
what
you
the
have a good
fuck?
reason for taking this journey. I should point out that
Alright, you
simple
guys
greed
have
is
Do I
not
need to
a
fun.
wear
good
the
reason.
hat?
I'll
Yeah.
see you
It was
tomorrow.
nice to
Yeah,
See you, Tess.
see you tomorrow
Good
evening
night,
This does not
for
Tess.
the
surprise
group.
me. I hope you
Good
will
night,
not
I'll
let
be
her
Tess.
come
there.
to harm.
We'll be
Good.
Famia is a worthy friend. She
Night night.
honestly
Wait,
tries
what's
to do
tomorrow
right by
night?
the Saxhleel, but her
Our group.
persistence, it
We
often
do
gets
the
her into
SF group
trouble.
tomorrow night.
I wish you luck. That is a fair
Oh,
point,
I was told
and
it
I
was
respect
next
nothing
Tuesday.
more than honesty.
No, it's just
As
Tuesday.
I said, my name is Zukas.
Okay, no.
It's Wednesday today. Dummy.
No, and
I just wanted to
I
take a
mean,
moment to
you know,
speak to Zukas.
Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Did I say Tuesday?
So we will become a hardcore soon.
No, we're not becoming hardcore.
Alright, well, I will be here tomorrow.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
Yes.
Uh, when is the end of the campaign? Is it tonight? Tomorrow?
Probably.
1 hour, 1 day and 14 hours. So the day after
Oh,
tomorrow.
okay.
So when they start tomorrow night, it's gonna be the same campaign.
Yeah.
Why not going into the standard tomorrow night just to at least enjoy our
Yeah, sure. Since campaign's ending tomorrow night, we can.
ending and we are so in bottom? There's nothing we can do in like 2 hours or 3 hours.
I can get 2,000 points in one day.
You can do that?
I just have to blow up everyone else's computer, that's all.
Oh, that's right.
2,000
Should do it.
points. That's
June style door release. Fascinating.
It's easy for
Here,
us.
look, please. Just pull that lever there.
How much point behind are we?
almost 2K.
Let me use my old calculator that Hills like.
It's not a calculator.
It's just under
Lamia.
2k, 1,800 and something. Unless you
Sadaza.
want me to do the exact math.
Alright, I'm hoping that we can at least make it to Nickel.
But otherwise, she's fine.
There's a three-way fight there.
One sec.
So
Let me.
Mars mercy. Try to find a
So,
way around.
to make
We'll look
them
for the others down
equal
here.
to ED, we need for the next 24
Somebody set up a
hours,
test pen for me to destroy.
1,767 points.
yeah, we need
Nice.
83 points higher
Well
more
done.
than the ED each
Let's
EVD.
You don't think there are any snakes in this water, do you?
That's a tall order. It's not impossible, but
But you know, ED are mad at the moment, so do not think it.
no, it's not gonna happen.
Some kind of mechanical
And next
bridge?
camping, do not forget that Crown is going that on ED
Oh,
side,
that's
so we're gonna
right.
have to fight with.
Nate is going to AD next campaign.
Yep.
I wonder what is. I wonder if Lom is coming back.
Look, those columns in the
I
water
can't
lead
even
to the
see
same
anybody.
symbols as the counterweights.
Protect me, Izza.
Really
Protect me.
holy puzzle. Never seen one
Hell
in
isn't here to
person.
do it.
I am in a loading screen. I'll be there in a second.
You left me to die, Hells, almost. Thankfully, Izza's, yeah. Just scare them away. They just run from her.
You guys dead?
No?
The only person I can see is this person, and I'm almost killing him. This is fucking hilarious. I'm a tank.
You're surrounded by like 3 others.
Spinjack crystals in no time.
4.
Friends, too.
This is awesome. Just slowly spawning in.
Why aren't we getting the low pop bonus, Dad?
You were earlier. You missed it.
Oh, I did.
Now we have 3 bars. That's why.
These idiots can't kill me. This is great.
Oh, now Hells gets ya. We need a healer in this group, Emmy.
Oh,
We
what to do? What to
Yeah,
do?
but
Thanks.
no.
Look up there. Flintstone.
I was going
All
where
to
reserves
to
showed up.
bed.
where are you guys? Oh shit, you guys are dead.
Rip Hells.
We're just outside the fucking wall.
It's got like 30 players on it. Why
Oh
did
no,
we ride from Velosterus to...
I don't know. I was following you.
Don't ask me. I don't know.
We just going where the big groups are to jab.
I guess let's
We
just go
got
to ask.
distracted.
They're gonna be coming.
Yeah, I got distracted learning how to call you.
What did I ever do to you as a... Oops.
the, the only thing I learned is massage.
Oh,
Talking to you, that's what you should learn.
oh, the word that you can use for fucker is connard. Connard. Yeah, connard.
I'm teaching her ways to swear.
I love it.
Hey, connard.
Konafu Jad. Oh wait, no.
Only if you
Would
marry
it
me
be-
first.
Oh, Kunajad.
Or
I wanted to say you fucker Jad.
tu es un connard, Jad.
Je ne kind of what?
Emmy.
Tu es.
Je ai.
I'm gonna type it to you. Okay?
Is it Ju and Konajet? Something like that? I don't know.
Oh, I don't hate you.
I didn't make is a hating jab.
That's what I said, Hells. I was asking you what I did.
Oh, what did I do?
I'd have her haircut.
See, Jad, I'm getting all the details.
Can
Not
anyone
all of them.
tell me about verify someone into guild? King Boober. Can you verify if he is in chapter 1 or 2?
Yeah, the name is that.
Perfect name.
He's in chapters 2.
They call him
Thanks.
Mr. Boober.
Mr. Boober, oh my god.
I'm never gonna let that poor person down.
Mr. Boober.
I am the great and powerful Boober. Hear me.
Oh my god, let's drop down.
You're not getting the details, but that one time when I joined the coffee bar with Hales, Emmy, and Tess in it, that was interesting. User would not be happy with that.
What? Oh, the sixth night. Are you talking about the sixth night?
Yeah, probably.
Yep.
Poor Goon. Goon is there, and I'm sure in his head, who the fuck are?
Yeah, I joined the comments to see how things are, and Tess just tells me to get out because, well,
I'm having 6 here.
yep, that's what Tess said.
That was
Terrifying.
like a bit, not
What?
exactly like this, but
Across the chasm.
it's some.
It sounded like Varro.
How many people are we tanking right now? I don't know.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 or 9.
It's not too bad. Also,
Is that a chapter house I see that one of them wearing? Oh, this guy's going for me. Save me.
they killed Dad.
Away. Aim for the abdomen.
Oh, we actually killed one of them. Kill him, get him.
Well, sorry, I have to go. Um,
Okay.
bedtime. Yeah, I'm tired, and I have a big day tomorrow again.
This guy's not healing himself for some reason.
So tomorrow it's 6:30 or 7.
6:30.
Okay, I will try to be there, and hopefully everyone will end up pretty much ready.
Yep, should be.
Okay. How many member do we have to sign up for tomorrow?
Around about 12, I think, 12 to 15.
Okay, that's good. That's great.
Yep.
If they all show up, that's great.
Oh, we
Jad,
killed one.
Jad, you should make a character well geared and play with us in this group. You will
Yeah,
have
you
fun.
should, yeah.
The others
That's
ran
right.
away 'cause one other person showed up. Well, 2 people.
Oh, no.
8 on 4 and they fucking ran away.
I have been working on my characters and getting them geared at least.
Yeah,
I think
and
they were kind of shocked because he dropped your storm and I dropped my storm at the same time, and then I froze him.
Mhm.
So they were like, oh shit, what?
Oh, 7 feet.
See, that's your problem, Dad. We're both in tanky builds. That's why we're not dying.
But I know. I also don't have my
Although,
champion points assigned for PvP.
please switch over to that. I actually have a full DPS set on me as well.
I took a real beating during the fall. Leg broke like
Come. Famia's crystal is through the next door. Hop down, yes?
A lot of them I just need more skill points. To remember to actually change my CP every
Ooh,
time.
watch that thing. It puts a bleed on you.
Zadaza will disarm it.
Which thing?
Oh, that whole Aegis thing.
Oh, I've been wondering how that would work in PvP. Although they did
Yeah,
nerf it a lot.
you do like a crit. Oh, did you see that? Is that?
He's gonna look at his kill pad and see that something that did like 1,000 damage killed
You're
him.
the only one who can find side passages.
I should spam the totem on the door. Oh, it goes up.
The Kajinjat crystal! At last! Careful, Fami.
I know how the totem
We have
works,
had
yeah.
enough falling and screaming for one day. Sound advice. It should just
If I
be
can
a
build
matter
my
of
Goliath. No,
wetting
no, don't go back
pressure
inside.
plates and-
Damn it.
There. Finally.
So now I'm the squishy one.
Oh
well,
shit!
good luck. Good luck, guys.
That will open the door.
by the root. Nico, I like the flame traps. Throw the ooze over them.
Oh my god.
Drag the
I
monsters
tanked all of them for like maybe 15 seconds.
I couldn't drop my trees, unfortunately. So
Yeah, I don't think trees would have helped with that.
Go get my
That's a
warden
lot of
too.
effects.
yeah, Jack, go get your warden. Put on some DPS sets, you know.
Emmy, Emmy.
Yes. Did you say bonne,
I'm
bonne
so
nuit?
glad you're here.
I'm very glad
I
that
missed you
you
too.
are here. I missed you.
Lure it here, Pico.
Yeah, well, why'd you miss me? I'm a nobody.
You're the Izza, the paddle, the bringer of death and goddess of battle angel too. That's titles.
I am the goddess of death and the battle angel.
Yeah.
What is the goddess of the battle angel, Jack? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that
I meaning to finish the first half of the
Trap. Drag the monster to it. Deadly gas. It fills the Zanmir. Run now before you suffocate.
The door is open. Hurry!
Leg. I'm right behind you.
I bet you're just sitting there repairing the door.
A chest!
Yeah, probably.
Leave it, Elf. You'll never get out in time.
Right, you're
We
right.
should go shoot it.
I don't have any siege.
I don't have any siege on me. Shit.
Well, we could drop down and take them.
Actually, there's nobody there. Oh, shit.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to Nickel
Oh,
then.
that's the anti-climactic.
Yeah. Do you see the size of the services on these days?
Yeah, what the fuck is this? Like, that wasn't even a Zerg. That was like a double Zerg.
Yeah. That's what we have to fight against at all times. I mean, the lag is actually so bad these days. It's actually difficult to drop your ults and stuff.
yeah.
Do not worry.
You gotta smash
I
the
have you.
ult button like 5 or 6
Perhaps you'll not
times
stop for
before it
useless
finally
relics
goes
next
off.
time, eh?
Yeah, I noticed that in that fight. Like, I couldn't fucking do anything, and there was only 8 people there.
Yeah, they added something to the with some kind of a delay in the skills. They tried to fix the lag and then they completely messed it up. Did you by any chance see the patch notes?
I haven't
I
looked
hope
at
you
patch
see
notes.
now.
There's
Like
there's a
a
there's a new
favor.
set
I know
which,
that
so if you basically off balance people, say with
Zucus is always
wall of
so polite.
storms,
I don't
or
know where
things
I'd be
like the
without him.
wall of elements,
Despite the
you get
mishaps, we have
13k
a good
penetration out of
time. No, yes, well,
on off
farewell,
balance.
everyone.
Yeah,
Please
I'm
do
not
not
even
make me
I'm
do
not
this
even
again.
joking.
well,
That's
Yeah,
that
fucking
is
is
nuts.
exciting.
that
I know. So
uh,
basically, as a tank. So if you drop wall of elements on a people and hit them with the proxy death, we will be doing damage
Our
unmitigated.
last expedition was Spike Pit.
can somebody say what that means for a noob like me?
Well,
Give me
it me
full white Zergs.
Ah, thank you. Simple terms.
Because there is no way in game, as of right now, I believe they still haven't added it, to stop being off balance.
yeah.
Oh.
I mean, in
And there's
CP
only
you can
one set
actually,
that does anything to help you while you're in off balance, and
yeah.
that is what the fuck is it?
And that set actually does like a so the 2, 3, and 4 set combos are spell damage, spell crit, spell damage, and the penetration 13k on off balance enemies. So if you pair it
Oh no,
with new,
I was talking about a set to defend against it.
yeah, I know. I was just
When
talking
you're
about.
off balance, there's a set
It's like
that
10
heals
EP
you for, like,
after this
3
gate. Yeah.
seconds.
Fuck.
Oh, I'll come to you.
But we can't go though. The gate is closed. Oh, it's
I've
repaired
jumped
now.
off.
Oh, son of a nugget.
No, but it's repaired. Repaired.
Ah, damn it.
Oh, no,
Oh,
we can
damn. Like 20
Look
EP.
here.
Oh, shit.
Yes, we'll get to that. But
What group is
first,
that? Let me
now,
go get
Mission
Jazz.
are you ready to? It's my missing companions.
What the fuck are they doing here?
A legend. Zukas's message said to me.
I'll run back down.
Okay. Oh god, I was hit with a synergy bomb. Wasn't able to break free. I'm rusty these days with the warden.
Jesus
Oh, that's
Christ.
Nate's group. That was Nate's group.
Who the
That
fuck
was,
is Nate?
Emmy's friend.
yeah, he used to run Omni, remember? In AD. And now he's running Vehemence.
Did everybody fucking go leave fucking DC and go fucking AD and shit?
Yeah, pretty much. A lot of players left in the last couple of campaigns.
It was Drac joined AD, I
Hey,
think.
somebody res me.
Drac joined AD, by the way, this
Though
campaign.
the Saxhleel generally choose to live in tribes based
Oh,
around a
interesting.
history, Lilmoth is a merchant town with no true leadership. That is why there are so many travelers in this town. Deeper in the swamp, the tribes tend to be more isolated and hostile to outsiders.
I'll wait
Professor,
for the gate for you.
Can you tell us what an oozit eagle is?
See, this is what happens when you miss time.
Yeah, and also if you if look at the patch notes, there's something about mythic weapons or mystic weapons or something like that.
And
I
the
didn't get.
antiquities update, yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be an absolute nightmare.
None of the antiquities I saw look particularly good, honestly. Oh, the new siege weapon could be cool.
Yeah,
Like,
did you see
magic
what was the
lens.
siege weapon?
Magic lens. It has a ice, lightning, and fire option. Or
Okay.
maybe it's 3 of them.
So you basically so it's like a fire ballista which can be tuned and stuff.
I actually haven't seen it in action yet, but I just know the name. One of them increases your speed by 2. One of them gets magical while sneaking or blocking. I think it's blocking. They're all in the PDS notes now. So many of them.
I like how
Lots of
the
fun-
entire group of DC got wiped out except for me. That's fucking awesome. Including you. Oh my
I
god.
know I can't break free from these days these as soon as these drugs.
I'll res you, dumbass.
Of the early internet stories, there are few as infamous as the Final Fantasy house. Though the details are unclear to most who remember it, its reputation is still sometimes invoked on forums in reference to terrible housemates or the eccentric potential from online communities, especially fandoms. What's more, it was one of the main channels through which internet users were introduced to the otherkin phenomenon. So what was the Final Fantasy house? On April 18th, 2005, a LiveJournal user under the handle of GenkiCrack made a long, scattered post detailing an experience with specific fans of Final Fantasy VII, a popular and influential story-driven game from Japan. He introduced it by writing, "These people are dangerous. This is not a joke. This is my experience with them." He began by explaining his place within the fandom. Quote, "Most people watching the journal now probably don't know this, but back in the day, I ran a pretty popular website devoted to the characters Cloud and the very minor character, Zack, from Final Fantasy VII. It was really the only comprehensive one out there about the two, which was why it got such notice. I was used to receiving fan mail or other people's fan art, which I'd put up on the website." Unquote. At the time of his alleged experience, he explained that he was a college freshman and a heavy drinker. In 2002, he was contacted by a person calling herself Hojo, referencing the mad scientist villain from the game, and the two began conversing with each other occasionally over AOL Instant Messenger. Hojo had her own fan site dedicated to her namesake, and following the same pattern, she began calling the writer Zack after his site. At the time, he thought nothing of this. Sometime after, he was introduced to Hojo's wife, who went by Genova, or Jen, after an ancient evil and alien creature from the game. The writer describes their first encounter online. Quote, "Then came a good old bombshell. I was asked if I had any memories of past lives. I do believe in past lives. I think it's a pretty valid cycle given how many cultures believe in it. So I told her no, I didn't, but I did believe in it. I should never, ever have said that. It was like inviting the vampire into my house. Jen's attack was swift and sure. She began in a flurry explaining things to me, how there are alternate universes. Do you grant me that? Sure, there could be. And in those universes, maybe, just maybe, video games actually happen. I thought it could be plausible, because I like imagining anything's possible. Through all of this and all this flurry, she tells me that she thinks in a past life, I was Zack from Final Fantasy VII. Think about it, she said. You're both country grown. You both have that instinct of dragging off friends who could be left behind. You'd take a bullet for someone, right? You say you don't believe in magic or any of that, and he wanted to be a mercenary. For all of his 5 or 6 lines, you have a similar speech pattern. You even live in a basement like he was locked in one, and you hate it. Addle your brain with freshman idiocy and vodka, and this will suddenly make sense. Sure, maybe I'm not him now, I said, but it was possible." Unquote. The writer agreed to meet them in the town of State College, Pennsylvania that winter to stay at their apartment, a week before Christmas. He was met at the bus stop by Hojo, wearing a lab coat, who escorted him back to where they were living. Quote, "When we arrived at the apartment, Jen, who insisted I call her Genova and would often refer to herself as Jenny Nova, came storming up to Hojo and I, screaming in Hojo's face. I have no idea what it was about. She was wearing a purple skirt pulled up around her breasts. It looked like she had just got out of bed, and I was, to say the very least, intimidated. About 3 seconds later, she whirled around in a quick change, suddenly the nicest person ever. Whatever she was mad about was out the window." About this time, I started to realize, though, Jen wasn't role-playing when she talked about her children and other selves. Jen is what the internet calls a soul bonder, or in other words, batshit loony. She believes she has a lot of people living in her head talking, and when she wants to take on a personality that best fits a situation for her personal gain, she acts one out. I.e., if she wanted to get sympathy, she would raise the pitch of her voice and pretend to be an innocent child." Unquote. Despite these occurrences, the writer's overall experience was positive, and he would frequently return for visits, each time paying $300 for a bus ticket. With every visit, he would meet someone new, many of them soul bonders themselves. Jen would frequently ask for money to buy food, but the writer would relent, feeling a sense of obligation. He would also attempt to help the writer and others grow past whatever Final Fantasy was. This was achieved through various means, including pantomime magical battles and a light performance involving laying on the floor and listening to music from the game. In one instance, on a trip to college, she and Hojo locked the writer and sound to his room past the point of panic to help him, quote, remember being Zack. Another time, when meeting someone soul bonded to the character Eris, Jen told 2003 with plans to only stay for the season. In 3 days, he found a part-time job at a supermarket to help pay for food and rent, and to quit drinking as well. His experience quickly degraded. Quote, I can't even say what came first, chicken or egg, but let's just say that after 1 week, I was getting sick. I was the worst. I guess because I was sad, I was there for the family, as opposed to Jen, the sector queen, or Kojo, the frail son. Jen quit the babysitting job and refused to believe in others. I was the one who had to carry groceries to and from the house, the one who made the money to feed everyone, the one who had to fix or move furniture, fixed or moved. My computer could rarely get online because Jen was on almost 24/7. The rest of the time, she would watch me as I typed, so I could never make a journal entry that read something along the lines of, Jen is abusing me, help me God, I'm tired and I want out of here. Jen's pattern of surveillance. She would always be listening in on calls, reading his online distractions, and demanding to know wherever he was distracted. She would frequently wake him up in the middle of the night for sundry magical errands, surprising him. Demanding he spend his meager paycheck on $2 steaks for dinner, made him sick, and those would only last one night. He and Kojo had him asked for unsolicited. Nobody in the apartment would take out the garbage or clean besides the writer, who only washed the dishes. And so the stink festered in the apartment on the hot Pennsylvania summer. Jen only wore a single dress and a single bathe, often instead through a scented oil. The writer described the smell of the apartment as rotting flesh and a miasma filled with sparkling sunshine dairy or liquid liver scent sprayed over. What's more, Jen and Kojo would eat each other loudly bedroom door followed by clothing set. This pattern of starvation, sleep deprivation, surveillance, and social isolation eroded the writer's will, and he began to torture him blindly. For example, while the writer was standing there, Eris, tired and shattered, the writer described the aftermath. Quote, apparently Eris called one night when Kojo and I were at the university to steal the book and said she wanted some of her things back that she had left in the apartment. Jen was Kojo. He called her cell phone screaming. Kojo called Sid and demanded he go over. Kojo called Eris and screamed. I called him. We rented a taxi for money we didn't have. Jen, who had been screaming she had slit her wrist, was sitting in front of the door. Sid screamed. Claws on her wrists. I woke up for a second and knew this was war. I had a problem with self-injury, so I knew very well the sight of the sight of a light touch. I know well likewise. Jen had scratched herself horizontally on the wrist. Maybe it had been with a safety pin or a button. It was not any kind of suicide attempt. Supposed it would sting, but I was still mad at Eris because I was supposed to be. I wrote her nasty email. I joined them back and I ignored her when she came to pick up her stuff. She ultimately wanted to still be friends with me. I regret that now because we never reconciled them. Maybe if I had got a clue and tried to get out with her, things would have turned out differently. Soon she was left with no money to use and no confidence to ask me. Even when he was father, Jen still hunted me. Then, when the guilt in the apartment grew unbearable, Jen and Kojo asked their landlord if they could move to a smaller, single-room apartment further in the writer was the one who soon after the move, the supermarket cut the writer's job to 1 hour a week. But even so, Kojo took all of them out to buy new things for the apartment, implying that she had been hiding money away in order to make the writer pay for things. Here, as they did many other times, they fought publicly. However, there was one person from the circle of friends in town who had consistently helped to stabilize the writer's mental state. A person who went by Sid, also a name from Final Fantasy, though the author describes him as having, quote, 1 foot in reality. He wrote, Sid occasionally would come over. When he did, I was glad because it was someone else. But he was and still does have his dickish moments. Jen would make these the be-all end-all, and Renee would back her up. I began to think he was like that all the time, and didn't want to hang out with him when he was gone. Once he came back, they had to restart the process of brainwashing me all over again. Unquote. It was after one of these visits that the writer finally gathered the will to leave. Inspired after someone had stolen his shoes, he left everything behind in the apartment and walked the streets barefoot. By the end, he had spent a total of 2 months living with Jen and Hojo. After being homeless for a few days, Sid helped him gather his things and return to his mother's home in Brooklyn. Besides his own account, the writer spoke of a few others involved with Jen specifically. One account was about someone he referred to as Captain McCool, a sensitive person with whom they sought to fill the vacant spot that the writer had left. When they asked him to move in with them, he was too nervous to turn them down directly, and so he claimed that he had been assaulted to avoid it. When they discovered his lie, they, quote, had him stuck in a chair and forced him to watch while they raped each other. Another person, whom he referred to as Bean, would sell her blood to help fund Jen's lifestyle. At the time he was writing the LiveJournal post, she was still living with them, but stayed in the attic and was forced to remain as quiet as possible. The writer expected some people in the Final Fantasy community to see this, but he couldn't expect the sort of attention it would receive. Word spread quickly about the LiveJournal post, and many fans of Final Fantasy, as well as Soulbonders, commented that they had heard some details about Jen and the group in State College, but hadn't known the extent of their behavior. Others who already knew her found these claims unsurprising. Beyond the community, however, this story gained interest on forums, including 4chan, who treated it with disgust and fascination. It was soon adopted into general knowledge as a way to reference poor living conditions and Soulbonders, a subsection of a group known as Otherkin. It was here that the infamous story earned its generally recognized name and misnomer, the Final Fantasy VII House, or often just the Final Fantasy House. Though the rest of the internet would sometimes question its veracity, the writer's account seemed generally accepted within the Final Fantasy community. He began to receive testimony from other people affected by the group, many of them people he had met during his time at the apartment. To share their correspondences, he created a website where he cataloged the accounts of those who approached him alongside his own. Due to the limited archival information available, it's difficult to say the rate at which he updated the site with new accounts, but it appears he was receiving them as late as 2006, with each person represented by a pseudonym. Some of these accounts were from people mentioned in the original LiveJournal post, and they helped elucidate the practices of the group and enunciate Jen's and Hojo's behaviors. These accounts suggest an air of amateurishness, yet charisma to everything Jen did. For example, one account from someone going by Zarla wrote, quote, there were also tarot card readings and such while we were there. Jen had the same tarot deck I had as a kid, the Tarot of the Cat People, and she told my fortune using the exact same method outlined in the little booklet that came with the cards. I can't remember anything really specific about the readings, except there was always mention of something coming after me or something, thus the coughing. If I remember right, later we were playing with a Ouija board and that something or someone was again trying to contact us. Unquote. These accounts would also unanimously support the assertions about Jen from the original writer. One of the oddest entries, however, was an open letter prefaced by the LiveJournal writer. Quote, the following was taken from the Wayback Machine. It is posted without consent of the original author, and I want to make that damn clear. She has nothing to do with it being here, so don't involve her. It is being backed up here due to the fact that it contains some current information that I felt should be edited out, like names or references to other people uninvolved. As far as I know, the original author is now happily farming turkeys in Idaho. Don't hassle her. This was written in 2003. The article itself is apparently written by another active member of the soul bonding community, though clearly no longer associated with Jen, under the pseudonym Candy Wrapper. The introduction to the letter reads, Genova, when I became your apprentice, you told me to shut up and not argue with you. Apparently, a sorceress is supposed to be a creature who blindly accepts the authority, even when she firmly believes that they are wrong. From this, I learned that when Jen says something I disagree with, I need to nod and make a green anyway. Otherwise, she would have to fight every 2 minutes. Quite frankly, saying what I thought wasn't worth the hassle. I am not, however, your apprentice, and I am free to say what I think. And I will, because you are free to say it, even if you want to read it. I do not actually give a crap whether you read it or not. It will hurt your feelings, and you will care that it happened, and I don't. You have been warned. The letter is structured in English, and the first item reveals irrational and reckless things. This is one of them. And it's not a good idea. You are wrecking Renee's life. It is wrong to do so, even if you have her permission. A few other choice lines read, you have no money because you keep spending it on things you want. Anything you want is not automatically a magical item. There may be evil magic in everything, but then there's magic in things you don't bother to look at. Things you can have for free. If something is a magical item, that doesn't mean you must own it. It would be nice if you could, but you can't always do so. I had money because I rarely bought anything for myself. Whenever I got some money, I would save it. I am not a money generator, and neither are my parents. If you want to have money, you need to not spend it. I now do not have money because I spent it on you. All gone. I still wanted more, but I didn't have any more to give you. I have been using crystals since I was 10 years old. You are wrong when you start with that you won't use them properly yet, because I have been using crystals since elementary school. You taught me no magic. The only thing I actually learned from you was to beware of people like you. But among these characters, one stood out from the others, and it's to be believed it showed just how far the manipulation of Jen's entourage could go. In November of 2005, the library writer sent email correspondence with a woman who went by Mela. Mela had apparently known and bonded with Jen in a Utah boarding school. We discovered her online and went over the letter. Though the quote in the email isn't quite the same, it's highly likely that the letter Mela discovered was written. Hoping to connect Mela and the author of the letter to Jen's information, sometime after she visited Jen's residence for 2 weeks. Here, she claims Jen was able to convince her to spend $2,000 on various objects and food by asking only for small amounts. Sometime afterwards, likely in 2005, Mela made the decision to leave the living room. Quote, I moved in with $17,000 in my bank account and see that Jen can bring all of my necessities, all for the house, many of which went to Jen's room and went to me. Soon I received a check from the investment I tried to get her to stop spending money on frivolous things, but every time I said no, I told her she should spend her own money on herself. All the time she was telling me how important I was to her special plan, how the world needed us to stick together so we could conquer evil, etc. I wanted desperately to feel special, but I was scared and alone. I believed her. She knew a few magic tricks, was very good at reading people, and could give relatively accurate tarot readings. I fell for her lies, hook, line, and sinker. After she moved in, it was clear that Kojo's relationship with Jen deteriorated. She had been supplanted by a new person named Angel. Mela was remarkably violent. Jen was living exclusively with Angel, though sometimes Kojo was with Angel as well. Kojo was forced to stay extremely silent during the day or was being berated by Jen. This information strongly suggests that Kojo was the one who felt blood to find Jen. Their hygiene was also still abysmal. Quote, oh, how Jen smelled. Angel was much worse though. I don't think that girl ever bathed. She just kept adding perfume, and Jen's purple skirt /dress stinks to hide out, but that was other things. Jen, during this time, was apparently made aware of the library writer's website as well. At some point, it appeared that they moved somewhere new, and it was here that she claimed she was beaten on multiple occasions. Once, during a dispute, one of them grabbed onto Mela's hair and started slamming her head into the floor while Jen and Angel beat her with their fists, then sat on her and attempted to choke her. Finally, she passed out from head trauma. Jen would later convince her that she had attacked Jen first, then blacked out. Eventually, Mela would tolerate no more, and she kicked them out. Much like their apartment, the house was left a mess, with Mela dumping some photographs. They also had stolen numerous objects upon their departure, including fabric instead of horses, though they demanded their back payment of rent, quote, in excess of 10K, is suspiciously exact. While this account is consistent with other reports of the group's behavior, there is no justifiable anything to verify the veracity of any of them, instead leaving only the word of the writers. Alongside this, the author would finally reveal the faces of Jen and Kojo. In the frequently asked questions section, he wrote, is this photo Vincent/Jen/Kojo? tale was structured in irregularly sized sections, with many of them ending on cliffhangers. He explained that he was living with 5 other people in a 4-story house. He claimed that the rent was a preposterously low $500 a month, and that the landlord, Matt, kept it that way because his chief concern was that he wanted company in the house he inherited. However, the standards for roommates were high. They all had to have stable income and employment and be at least 25 years old. The woman was chosen after their beginning house was kept anonymous by Dragonfly, and became the placeholder named Sarah, who moved in without much trouble. She claimed to be a 27-year-old computer programmer who already had a job in the area, and when she went back to work after the move, she returned to take her job. And others offered to help her find new work, she consistently delayed accepting it, which made them suspicious. But much more striking was her connection to the game. Quote, in the 3 weeks that followed, Sarah was so unemployed. She spent all her time playing video games in the family room. She would play the same game over and over, some crappy-looking RPG from the 90s. It had an unpronounceable name, but Sarah said she was bonded to the game. She also told us that she changed her name to be that of one of the game characters. Upon further discussion, she explained that she believed she was the human incarnation of this character, and that they shared a soul. He refused to reveal what character he was claiming to be, however, since it would be identifying it. This game would, in the second update, be revealed to be the Japanese RPG Suikoden, released in 1995. Soon afterwards, a friend of hers came to visit the house. She also believed herself bonded to a Suikoden character. He typically satirized, but since she could neither spell nor pronounce it, he simply called her something. After spending a week together playing video games, they ticketed a barbecue that the rest of the housemates were having, but they had been given a vegetarian option to join. They refused on moral grounds, renouncing it for eating meat. After they were aggressively told off, they were asked for a house meeting, which took place in March, to discuss whether or not Sarah would be allowed to stay. Sarah attempted to explain herself. Quote, Sarah lifted her head and started to talk. She started with, I am sorry, but you have to understand where I am coming from. She also said, lots of people can't understand me because I have such a high intellect to see on their craft. Excuse us for being sane, bitch. They eventually learned that she had used some of the she had passed the screening process. She had never had a job in California, was from the East Coast, and used a friend's address to get a California driver's license while another was with her boss. Matt allowed her to stay until May 1st, since she had already paid for April. Sarah, however, wasn't willing to leave so easily. By this point, numerous street attendees were drafted, begging for updates to what they would call the Sarah saga, and many returned daily in hopes that a new part was depicted by the future. In response to the pressure from Matt and the rest of the house, Sarah isolated herself in her room, separated herself from the girlfriend. She would only be there to capitalize. However, this didn't last long, as Matt was able to pull a favor from a psychologist that was treatment for free, and managed to convince Sarah to attend. Soon, she was on medication and was interacting with the others on a more normal basis. It was during this time that they discovered Sarah's true form of income. Quote, she said, plain as can be, I have people offer me donations on my blog so I can spread the news of my religion. Her religion being that she was actually a male video game character from a game that came out in the 90s. What? So there are some morons out there who are giving money to Sarah so she can pretend to be a video game character and teach others how to do the same? Something said, we give her things because she has helped us find our true selves. So you don't work either. No, right. No, I get government benefits in the UK. Why? Because I don't like to work. Soon after this, Sarah's boyfriend convinced her to abandon her medication, and the results were violent. After one of the ruder housemates demanded she start taking the pills again, she began smashing fragile objects, including a window. She would continue to take her pills irregularly, but by this point, interaction between her and the rest of the house fell to a minimum. By the time May 1st came, there was no sign of her moving out, and when Matt attempted to evict her, Sarah called the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, claiming discrimination against her religion and her disabilities. While the state didn't follow through on these threats, they did discover that Matt had never filed the correct paperwork to house tenants, and Matt couldn't evict her until the proper paperwork was filed. But the strangest event would happen that summer. In July, Sarah gathered 12 members of her soul bonding group at the house to perform a ritual, threatening Matt that she would file a discrimination suit against him if he wouldn't let them stay. Though Matt acquiesced, he only allowed them to stay until 10 o'clock that night. One roommate demanded that the soul bonders be ejected, but Matt wanted to gawk at their ritual, and so they stood in the kitchen and ate pizza while watching them. Pete describes the ritual. Quote, Sarah came downstairs, dressed in a white dress. She kept glancing at us. Something stood between her and us so she couldn't see us, I guess, and she began talking. She talked about how this was Betty's awakening and how Betty was now going to finally realize her potential by harnessing the soul of a video game character. I couldn't stand it. I started cracking up. The rest of the housemates started cracking up. This was better than any kind of TV you can imagine. See if you can picture all of these nutjobs kneeling around the altar as the video game played its music in the background. Sarah stood over them, preaching this religion, and the right bishop something would occasionally interject something deep from her position. Sarah was really getting upset, so more of her friends made the human wall. We could still hear all the stupid, even after they turned up the volume on that video game. At this point, Matt threatened to call the police since it was nearly 10 o'clock, but when one of the members of Sarah's group threw a punch, the threat was carried out, and the group was forced from the premises. After this point, other members of the house would share some of their experiences, but as they did, readers grew more suspicious. Before this, many people had been doubting the veracity of the claims made by Pete, but when the other housemates began to write in a similar fashion to him, it made them even more dubious. These disagreements eventually spiraled into arguments whose full scope was not archived before being deleted, but they were apparently severe enough for the moderator of Housemate Horror to write a post regarding them. Also in this post was a surprising and unexpected piece of information. Quote, Tim, Pete, and Carrie, aka the people posting from the account Dragon Tiger Claw about the Sarah saga, may be as they say they are, different housemates of Sarah, or they may be the one person doing a little creative writing experiment. Basically, I don't give a crap. The posts have been amusing and entertaining, and anyone who doesn't think so is not being forced to read them, so please do not complain. Farther down, the mod continues. It has been brought to my attention that a post was made by someone who was claiming to know Sarah, and that the posts made by DTC were false and harassing blah blah wah blah. This same person, Jay Eckhart, sent me an email before they made that post, requesting IP address information on the poster of the Sarah stories in order to catch the culprit making these false and harassing posts. I declined, as I do not think giving out personal/identifying information such as IP addresses on members of my community without their permission is really a good thing to do you? Also, I have no proof that this person is really representing Sarah or that the posts made about her are false. I have no proof that they are true either, but until I get proof either way, I think the best thing is to not take any drastic actions. They requested I not tell DTC about them contacting me, and I intended not to, simply because it was the most neutral action to take, but then they made that post and made their intentions public, so I feel fine with telling you all, including DTC, about the email now. But meanwhile, elsewhere on the internet, other people were having their own discussion about the Sarah saga, and they would quickly discover much more than they first expected. On August 19th, 2008, a member of the Something Awful forums named Jabberwock posted a thread entitled If You Thought Furries Were Bad, which linked to the 11 parts of the Sarah saga that had been posted so far. The responses seemed mostly to reflect amusement, though quite a number of forum members echoed the doubt displayed in the comments of the posts themselves. One user, however, who went by Jägerhunde, had a different response. Quote, I haven't read through the journals, I only started the first, but I swear this could be about a girl I knew and even once dated in that really vague, sad high school nerd way. She claimed that she was soul bonded to the Eris character from Final Fantasy VII, that her girlfriend was soul bonded to Sephiroth, and she swore at one point with perfect seriousness that she was carrying Sephiroth's spirit child. Apparently, she'd conducted an elaborate fantasy life with these characters in her head and had written pages upon pages of god-awful fanfiction about it. So far as I know, she grew out of it eventually, but when I say eventually, I mean like late 20s. Even when I knew her at 16, this kind of behavior from her made me want to stay far the fuck away. Oh yeah, the girl in question also changed her name to some bullshit nerd fantasy name she made up and absolutely refused to ever be addressed by her birth name. After reading through the rest of the entries, Jägerhunde returned the next day with a new post that took the other readers aback. Pretty sure I've got this all sewn up, goons. Allow me to introduce you to Catherine Rain. By pure chance, Jägerhunde had been in a small writing club in high school with Catherine, and still knew her Flickr account, her DeviantArt account, and her LiveJournal account. They also discovered the Flickr account of someone cosplaying as Sasarai, who had numerous pictures of both herself and Catherine. One of these images credited her as Catherine Silverberg, Silverberg being the surname of a family of characters from Suikoden, known for their tactical prowess in war. Other photographs had Catherine in a white dress, something that Sarah had worn in the Sarah saga. But the most telling piece of evidence Jägerhunde discovered was legal paperwork of her name change. By searching for her name in the county archives, he was able to discover her court schedule for when she legally changed her name. Though the accounts of Pete and his housemates were still doubted, the identity of Sarah seemed almost certain. They also were able to track down the website that this soul bonding community was using to proselytize curious internet users. Another person rediscovered the pamphlets that they would hand out at conventions. Part of it reads, "The runes are devoted to preserving the natural order of life. While it can't be denied that their bearers have often experienced great hardship as a result of bearing the runes, we know that this is due to inexperienced bearers with no magical training, suddenly and unexpectedly receiving the rune's gifts. With no knowledge of how to live in harmony with these powerful entities, they can't control the vast forces raging in turmoil inside themselves. But if people were taught to listen to and understand the runes, they would have the healthy, positive relationships with them that we were always meant to have." The end of the pamphlet encourages readers to contact Bishop Sasarai. After looking through the information on the Final Fantasy house, Jägerhunde made another assertion, that Catherine had also been deeply involved with Jen and Hojo. He believed that she was in fact both Candy Wrapper, the person who had written the list on the website, as well as Alice, the apprentice that Jen had lost. Catherine had also been attending the University of Delaware during the events of the Final Fantasy house, only a 2-hour drive from State College. It appeared that, after these two distanced themselves from one another, Catherine began her own soul bonding community based on the Suikoden games, gathering followers over the years. Though the evidence linking the two was circumstantial, the specificity of it left little doubt, and this revived interest in the Final Fantasy house enough that new people were again discovering it. On August 22nd, just 2 days after Jägerhunde had posted about Catherine, he made another post saying, quote, "Took a day off, everyone. I don't really have anything more to add, except to mention to everyone that I've become aware that our protagonist is now aware of this thread. Say hi, everyone." Gleefully, the rest of the forum members began to post messages to Catherine, mocking and teasing her, claiming to be soul bonded to any number of characters or objects. That same day, however, an update was posted to the Final Fantasy house website. Quote, "I updated some stuff to make it slightly more legible. Evidently, housemate Horror's Sarah is not Rain Crystal. This comes to me via the writer of the Sarah saga. If you think he's lying or that I'm lying, that is your own business, but that is what he told me. Rain Crystal's behavior, soul bond nuttiness, getting money for it, etc., is similar enough to Sarah that she is harassing the writer to stop posting his lies about her. As such, I still think she's worth warning people about. I am sorry, but based on my experiences and the experiences of others, soul bonders are dangerous freakos." Unquote. The next day, Jägerhunde had a strongly worded reply. Quote, "This is actually a goddamn lie. Greta is a litigious-loving nut, and it sounds to me like housemate Horror Dude is doing damage control. I don't blame the Final Fantasy VII house author, since he's probably taking it simply on faith that our housemate Horror author is telling the truth. But he's not, and anyone who's read this far through the thread should see through this pathetic obfuscation pretty easily." Unquote. In response to one person asking for clarification, Jägerhunde replied, "It would be irresponsible for me to say that Greta and her friends have their collective panties in a wad about the housemate Horror thing and have been pressuring the author to recant, so I won't. I'd like to add that it's possible that the housemate Horror author is a very elaborate troll, but even if he is, this is clearly someone who knows Greta, if it's her, of course, and while I'm willing to entertain the idea that some of the particulars might be fabricated, the fact that anybody you know, like maybe Greta, has possibly gotten so defensive about a series of stories, which even use false names, says much about that person." Unquote. Finally, on August 24th, in mid-afternoon, all parts of the story were removed from the Housemate Horror blog.
Elder Scrolls
However,
Online.
working from Google Cache, the members of the forum were
You
able
may
to
like
piece
it.
together all of the parts that had been written by Dragon Tiger Claw and archive it on the forum, though it also had been saved on the Wayback
Completely
Machine.
forgot.
That same day, the original Final Fantasy House author posted an update to his website.
Are you in the show or the game?
Well, what do you know? When something awful found Catherine Rain,
Yeah,
things
yeah.
really heated up.
Yeah,
The
yeah, it's
original
pretty
writer
long.
of the Sarah saga got regular harassment until he took the story down. Considering the mind-numbing level of consistent details between Catherine's data and the data on Sarah, I'm going to agree with the goons. The OP was just doing damage control. It's obviously her. The current theory is, in one last-ditch effort to avoid more court battles with her, he deleted all the posts. Well, Greta, you stepped in it. You took away my train wreck that I was reading to defend your crazy cult. If he was writing fiction or not, you took away the fun. Thanks to something awful, we'll have lots of nice photos and links all here about you in just a little while. Unquote. This last update remains on the website to this day, and a link to the Sarah Saga thread on Something Awful is provided farther down the page. Now, the Final Fantasy House's website and the Sarah Saga remain as a warning about fandoms taken to their extreme, but they also serve as an example of how the online space collapses the distances between people, so that even old friends with no more existing ties can discover or stumble across one another, with wildly unpredictable effects. Site. Quote, I updated some stuff to make it slightly more legible. Evidently, Housemate Horror's Sarah is not Rain Crystal. This comes to me via the writer of the Sarah Saga. If you think he's lying or that I'm lying, that is your own business, but that is what he told me. Rain Crystal's behavior, soulbond nuttiness, getting money for it, etc., is similar enough to Sarah that she is harassing the writer to stop posting his lies about her. As such, I still think she's worth warning people about. I am sorry, but based on my experiences and the experiences of others, soulbonders are dangerous freakos. Unquote. The next day, Jägerhunde had a strongly worded reply. Quote, this is actually a goddamn lie. Greta is a litigious-loving nut, and it sounds to me like Housemate Horror Dude is doing damage control. I don't blame the Final Fantasy VII House author, since he's probably taking it simply on faith that our Housemate Horror author is telling the truth. But he's not, and anyone who's read this far through the thread should see through this pathetic obfuscation pretty easily. Unquote. In response to one person asking for clarification, Jägerhunde replied, it would be irresponsible for me to say that Greta and her friends have their collective panties in a wad about the Housemate Horror thing and have been pressuring the author to recant, so I won't. I'd like to add that it's possible that the Housemate Horror author is a very elaborate troll, but even if he is, this is clearly someone who knows Greta, if it's her, of course, and while down the rabbit hole. Recently, there was a bundle sale on Steam called the Digital Homicide Bundle, selling 5 games for $1. It seems like a good deal at first, but all of these games have abysmal user ratings, some dipping below 30% approval. One would assume that 30% of people approving the game means that it still has some value, and that's true, but not in the way that one would assume. A cursory glance at the player reviews reveals that people are giving a thumbs up not because the games are quality, but because these games give Steam trading cards, which can be sold on the marketplace for credit towards other games. This means that, if bought in the bundle, they technically get a return on investment, even if it's only a couple of cents if you don't count the electricity cost of running the computer. There are a few common problems with each game. The gameplay is rudimentary, there is no artistic unity, and even the menus are uniquely painful to use. Assets are recycled ad nauseum, including a cyclops, a rat, a bare-chested harpy, an actual bear, sundry zombies, skeletons, and numerous others. The enemy AI is also basic. In none of these games do they perform any other action than run directly at the player in an attempt to fuse their model with the target. Any semblance of balance in these games is also absent, meaning they are almost universally easy even when some gameplay elements are breaking. At first, it's easy to think that the name of the pack, Digital Homicide, is a catchy way to bundle multiple games together, but it actually refers to the single developer of all of these games, Digital Homicide Studios. In fact, the number of games produced by the studio is far greater than 5. According to the official Digital Homicide group page on Steam, there are 18 associated games. Their website, tastefully given the URL digitalhomicide.ninja, offers literally dozens more games under the tab Greenlight Games, referring to Steam Greenlight, which allows users to vote on games they wish to see on Steam's storefront. Their website is a strange amalgamation of generic assets, including a deformed-looking fuzzy creature and, oddly enough, a female model in a footballer's outfit, holding a football over her groin. The blog seems mostly abandoned, with only 6 posts, all within the month of February of 2016. The first 3 are game development advice for aspiring indie developers, while the last 3 are advertisements for games being released under the Digital Homicide brand. Not long ago, the website looked different, with an advertisement for their game Assholes across the front of the page upon entering, and the words Games Made with Love just to the left. Digital Homicide has a strange relationship with Steam Greenlight. When one of their games inevitably fails, they simply put it back onto Greenlight, hoping to garner enough votes the second or third or 7th time around, sometimes using dummy publishers to get around quality control. So who is Digital Homicide? The company is comprised of 2 people, a pair of brothers named James and Robert Ramin. Very little is known about them, and only the latter has divulged any information about himself. This raises many questions, but there's one that stands out. How are 2 brothers managing to create dozens of games in the span of only a few years? To understand this, one must be familiar with the concept of asset flipping. All Digital Homicide games are created on the same engine, Unity. There are plenty of good and even great games made on the Unity engine, such as Kerbal Space Program, Ori and the Blind Forest, Superhot, and Hearthstone. However, it is notoriously easy to create rudimentary games with it. Many burgeoning game designers have begun using Unity to try their hand at game development, while others use it to create strange and absurdist experiences and release them for free.
I hear story of friend. This friend is Shamrock. He reverses ground magnets with touch.
Just as often, however, it's abused by independent developers to quickly make a terrible game, slap a price tag on it, and push it out the door to turn a profit. To increase the odds of someone buying the game at face value, these developers often will rely on buying pre-made game assets for cheap, something expedited by the prolificacy of assets made specifically for Unity. This practice has grounds in legitimate game development, where indie developers purchase assets such as 3D models to save both time and money, so that other aspects of the game can receive attention. The intention is to build upon these assets and use them as a framework, but sometimes a lazy or cheap developer will buy a myriad of assets and plunk those onto basic coding, then call it complete, a process known as asset flipping. Buying game assets works similarly to buying a font. Rather than purchasing a physical object, the buyer gains unlimited rights to utilize that particular asset, meaning that this process is 100% legal, however shady it may be. By asset flipping, Digital Homicide Studios can churn out games at an unprecedented rate, games that may seem competent on the surface but prove to be vapid and hollow. Despite how egregious this practice is, James and Robert Ramin would have remained an obscure element of Steam's underbelly, were it not for a few bewildering and vitriolic actions against one of the internet's more controversial figures, Jim Sterling, the online persona of a game critic named James Stanton. There's a significant subset of content creators on YouTube who enjoy making videos about terrible games, and Jim Sterling is one of them. Among the many topics he covers in gaming, he has a series called Squirty Plays, a gag based on the popular Let's Play videos. In these, he chooses games that, to him, seem obviously squirted onto Steam to make some quick cash on gamers who don't know any better, and plays them without researching them beforehand as a first impression. On November 1st of 2014, Sterling chose to feature The Slaughtering Grounds, which Digital Homicide had released onto Steam the night prior under the guise of another studio, Imminent Uprising. Predictably, the game was low quality, but Sterling seemed more confused than disgusted during the 10.5-minute long video as he scrambled about through the pre-purchased assets in an attempt to find ammunition for his poorly stocked weapons.
Hello, what's this? Oh, we need a new gun. I got nothing.
Enraged by the negative reception, James and Robert Ramin took to YouTube themselves in an attempt to strike back at this slight. They uploaded Jim Sterling's video onto their own channel as part of what they claimed was a new series entitled Reviewing the Reviewer. This video had text overlaid on top of it, criticizing Jim Sterling and the video. The first slide of text reads, and I quote, "Hello, this is Jim Sterling and I am a fucking idiot. Don't believe me? Well, just watch this piece of shit review I've made." The text continues to lambast Jim Sterling throughout the rest of the video, liberally insulting his intelligence and the quality of his content, calling it useless shit and other vulgar pejoratives. They also blame Sterling for not providing an adequate review. Jim Sterling, possibly recognizing an opportunity to draw in new viewers as well as to archive the video, re-uploaded the Ramin Brothers' re-upload, but instead replaced the original audio with unscripted reactions to the text. Here, he retorts that the Squirty Plays series isn't a review series, but rather about first impressions, though he dismisses most other points as the actions of a crazy developer.
I'm Jim fucking Sterling and I deliver accurate reviews. It's not a review! I told you I would tell you the bug of the landmines work, and you can depend on me providing you with more useless shit reviews and...
In a fit of recursion that would make Christopher Nolan blush, the Ramin brothers uploaded a response to Sterling's response, though this time there was no video. Instead, they only used the audio from Sterling's response and overlaid white text on a black background, again riddled with poor grammar. In this slideshow of text, they claim that, by purchasing pre-made assets, they are assisting with the production of further games and, thus, the cycle of game development. This misunderstanding of economics is forgivable, but their other claim is much bolder. In a strange confusion of fair use law, they ask, how is it okay to commit 60 frames of copyright infringement a second for 40 minutes and then get paid for it, referring to the use of game footage? They then accuse Jim Sterling of contributing to the practice of, quote, unfair reviews, and thus affecting the livelihood of many people with no risk or cost to yourself. This video was followed with something all YouTube content creators dread, a takedown notice on the original Squirty Plays video by the Ramin brothers. Takedown requests on YouTube are almost unanimously respected by the administration, and anybody can issue a takedown request on any video for any reason. When a takedown goes into effect, the video is removed from viewing by the general audience for 4 weeks, with the onus on the requester to prove that some element of the video is indeed illegal. Often, certain companies with a vested interest in keeping a certain video offline will issue a takedown request that they can't follow up to reduce viewership of it and to punish the content creator by cutting into their revenue. Digital Homicide, however, backed up its takedown request to the media, albeit with more poor grammar, stating that, quote, there are countless negative review videos posted, including multiple Sterling videos, and only one in particular with a DMCA filed on it. The reason is we have a legitimate claim, we can prove a violation of our copyright, fair use is not blanket immunity, and damages. They went on to say that, we believe the unbiased perspective of a court will agree there has been a violation of our copyright, and for this reason, we will be pursuing an attorney and proceeding with our complaint. Despite these confident claims, it seems that no further action was taken, and the video returned to Sterling's channel 4 weeks later. This scenario may sound familiar to some gamers. This is because something extremely similar happened almost exactly a year ago to another content creator, who goes by Total Biscuit, when he created a review for the now infamous indie game Day 1 Gary's Incident. Jim Sterling, however, was in a slightly different position. Rather than receiving advertising revenue on any of his videos, he receives all of his money from a site named Patreon, where people may donate money to content creators on a monthly basis to support them. This means, beyond the need to continue supplying content to viewers, there is no direct financial need to keep his videos online, and, in fact, it's likely that the controversy was generating further income for him. So, rather than fighting the takedown of his video, he began making further videos, not only on the general topic of media silencing from indie developers, but about the specific business practices of the Ramin brothers themselves, all while the original Squirty Plays video sat with a takedown message plastered on it. He quickly outed them as not imminent uprising, but instead the Digital Homicide Development Studio, accused them of asset flipping rather than true game development, then used that as a springboard to talk about the practice in general. In a surprising move, Robert Ramin decided that the actions taken by Digital Homicide Studios was not enough, and he challenged Jim Sterling to what he called a free-form debate to set the record straight once and for all. In early July of 2015, this meeting indeed did occur over Skype and was recorded. The perplexing discussion lasted almost an hour and 40 minutes, with no mediator. It was in this recording that the audience to this 8-month argument got to hear the voice of Robert Ramin for the first time. Here, he claims to be a 35-year-old man with 3 children, and that Digital Homicide has proven to be a successful business venture.
I was expecting to not hear the voice of an adult, so this makes me feel a little bit better about things.
Oh yeah, I have 3 kids. I'm 35. I'm definitely an adult.
The discussion in its entirety is a surreal experience. It begins somewhat cordially, where both parties acknowledge that they are participating in a one-sided conversation and are reluctantly thankful that they can now speak to one another. At about 2.5 minutes, however, things start to take a strange turn, and Robert Ramin's true intentions begin to manifest. He begins talking over Jim Sterling, disallowing him from responding to the accusations leveled at him. Ramin's voice also begins to crack in what sounds like restrained anger.
Let's talk specifically about your nonsense. Just go ahead and start all the way back at the beginning and go ahead and ramble off all your accusations and stuff.
He tells Sterling to point out problems with Digital Homicide, and Ramin will pick them apart one by one, but continues to cut him off. Ramin quickly turns the conversation in an attempt to attack Sterling's professional credentials and deflects Sterling's arguments into further attacks throughout the conversation.
Which is why
it's your job.
I did the same.
It is your job. You telling me that when you were playing that game, you couldn't see the ammo counter 2 inches below the crosshair? I mean, come on. If you're gonna, we're going right back to what we were saying about you saying I'm an incompetent developer. As a game reviewer, you should be a very quality game player.
Ramin seems to become more emboldened as the conversation continues, passively aggressively and sometimes ad hominem attacking Sterling more and more.
The sheer geographical chaos that was your menu system.
That's what just goes to show why you're a bad person, man. You
a bad person?
Yes, you're terrible. You are terrible.
What becomes abundantly clear midway through the conversation is Robert Ramin's stance on reviewers. He seems to believe that reviewers have a personal responsibility to the developers, and that negative issues should be taken to forums rather than reviews.
You have no financial investment in what you do, yet you affect tons of developers' lives, financially affect them. That is why one day you're gonna have enough subscribers, you're gonna make enough money on your Patreon thing, and somebody's gonna get tired of your shit and they're gonna sue you. I'm not saying we are. I'm saying somebody's gonna have the money to do it, and they're gonna win.
Oh, is that what we've devolved into?
Exactly.
This last point is a sore subject for many gamers around Jim Sterling's age due to the game market crash of 1983. Side note, the game market crash of 1983 brought the industry from $3.2 billion to only $100 million in 2 years, which is only 3.1% of where it once was. It is largely blamed on the oversaturation of the market with games and a lack of reliable reviews for gamers to determine the quality of products. Only the market success of the Nintendo Entertainment System was able to bring the industry.
They called it a fever. In the early 1980s, arcade games were huge. A golden era kick-started by Space Invaders and held aloft by hits like Pac-Man, Galaga, and Donkey Kong. Players were keen to fill coin boxes, and the market obliged. Video games were big business. Atari were the vanguard of the industry, backed by the financial might of Warner and dominant in the home console market. The VCS, later known as the 2600, was the standard. With the biggest games and aggressive marketing, its sales performance was stellar. Atari couldn't manufacture enough cartridges to meet demand. A license to print money, retailers committed to sales a year in advance. But where there's gold, there's a rush. Atari had no shortage of rivals. Mattel's Intellivision, the Fairchild Channel F, Bally Astrocade, ColecoVision, Vectrex, and the Magnavox Odyssey 2. Worse still, with no control over cartridge publishing, third-party games started to appear on the market. Activision had the talent to deliver hit titles like Pitfall, River Raid, and Kaboom, but they were joined by a cavalcade of games of more questionable quality. During 1982, the total number of games for the system doubled. In 1983, they doubled again. Shelf space was stretched thin, and per-game revenue raced to the bottom. Atari weren't concerned. They were in the lead. Millions of dollars spent on exclusive licenses, tie-ins, and massive marketing budgets. The more they spent, the more they earned. The games themselves didn't matter. Pac-Man was the hottest coin-op of the era, and Atari had the exclusive console rights. However, with a cruel time budget and the limited hardware of the 2600, the final product was disappointing. Crude graphics, grating sound, and flickering ghosts. The expectation of authentic arcade action fell short. In the run-up to Christmas 1982, Pac-Man was joined by two other lackluster blockbusters. Raiders of the Lost Ark, written off as an inferior version of Pitfall, and E.T. the Extraterrestrial. E.T. is often cited as a reason for the crash, the worst game of all time. But it was just a mediocre tie-in that was supposed to be an easy cash grab. Never the cause, just a symptom. A few disappointing games aren't enough to sink an industry. But when marketing promise fails to deliver, a creeping realization emerged. Everybody knew it. The Atari was obsolete. A cold 1982 was coming to an end. With no warning, Warner announced earnings for the last quarter. And it wasn't good news. The systems just weren't selling. Unsold cartridges were being returned from stores in droves. Instead of meeting their ambitious growth predictions, revenue had dropped 50%. Stock prices plunged, and a panic hit Wall Street. Confidence in the nascent industry evaporated. Total losses for the year stacked up to $500 million. No amount of marketing could save Atari from the truth. It was game over. The upstart company, originally driven by curiosity, was torn apart by corporate greed. Rapid growth at any price. Where Atari led, their rivals followed, for better or for worse. the Intellivision brand was liquidated, Coleco and Magnavox both left the games industry, and a plethora of clones were quietly discontinued. Atari was sold for a song to Commodore's Jack Tramiel. Games were consigned to clearance bins, and shelf space reallocated in favour of hotter trends. Cabbage Patch Kids, Transformers, Care Bears, He-Man. The video game fad was over. Dead and buried. Gone, but not forgotten. America wasn't the only market for video games, nor were consoles the only option. In Europe, 8-bit microcomputers had taken hold. The BBC Micro, Commodore 64, and ZX Spectrum. For those playing Manic Miner, Attic Attack, or Elite, it was like the crash never happened. Meanwhile, in Japan, their console market was just taking off, with Nintendo and Sega releasing their first machines. Atari were in talks with Nintendo to distribute their console in America, but in light of their trouble, Nintendo decided to take control. In 1985, the NES arrived in the USA and defined the next generation. In the years that followed, video games saw a return to bestseller lists, and it's mostly been plain sailing ever since. But what about today? Could it ever happen again? Perhaps it already has. Whatever happened to skateboarding games, 3D platformers, real-time strategy, World War II shooters, motion controls? What's going to happen to block building games, open world action adventure, early access survival sandboxes? What's popular today won't remain forever. Trend follows trend, and while those who pin their hopes on a single success might suffer, the industry is broader and more robust than ever. The truth is, video games never died in 1983. They just respawned. Thanks for watching, and until next time, farewell. There is a video game that doesn't exist. It's a myth, an urban legend, a hoax. It's called Polybius, and you might have heard of it.
On April 21st, Bleeding Fool disseminated the highlights from an
What kind of
April
band is
13th
RTV?
interview published by rebelscum.com. In this interview, which hadn't caused many waves up until that point, Rebel Scum spoke with Chuck Tercera, president of Diamond Select Toys. And here, the lack of demand for merchandise based on Disney's Star Wars sequel trilogy characters is once again confirmed. Of course, Star Wars isn't the only brand where the once great merchandising revenue stream has shriveled up significantly. There's also Star Trek. By a funny coincidence, both Star Wars and Star Trek have been ran into the ground by Bad Robot, and next on their hit list is Warner and DC. In this editorial then, I'll be going through the highlights of the Rebel Scum interview and what we can learn from that, before comparing and contrasting what was done with Star Wars to Star Trek, and finally explore specifically what Bad Robot has in store for us next. To provide some context here, Rebel Scum spoke with the president of Diamond Select Toys about upcoming Star Wars themed busts, statues, and other figurines from Gentle Giant Limited. Rebel Scum proceeded to list the relatively few such items made from the recent Star Wars movies thus far, before asking the Diamond Select Toys president if there are any more plans to release product from those films. The president then proceeded to answer, and this is the long version. As you know, whatever was done before last year, Diamond Select Toys had no control over. Gentle Giant Limited made those decisions. But as I said, Dev is still here guiding the brand, and we are aware of the past history. I will say, from what we have seen, the sales on the products from 7 and 8 were not too strong. I know those movies, as well as 9, have their fans, and those fans may say Gentle Giant just never did the right products, or characters, or formats, and they might be correct. However, we can only go by what we know. For sure, the
Only the scent of conspiracy, but for now, the scent is enough. The Dragonstar Caravan Company, a dishonest flock of thugs and not yet. I do not.
Are you gonna play or what? What's the holdup? Tiba Inu? More like Tiba, stupid. This game's a joke. No tusk jabs, no eye gouges. I have got no tusking idea. Neither do these lizards. When I got here, they were all just lying there. Then all of a sudden, half of them stood up and started slapping their tails, croaking like mad and kicking balls around. I don't know, half a dozen maybe? They were bouncing them off that rock, and then the other two started hooting and slapping their tails like monkeys. They rushed the hill, formed a circle around a rock, and started standing on their heads.
Very well done. You must be half river boa, Biko. Those wub looked hypnotized. No, no, I give you too much credit. He has a brain like a bone trout. But my tongue wanders. Let me read this. Oh, this is... Yes, this may rattle the cattails. It is not just notes on business dealings. It is a description of friend Famia, where she walks, who she speaks with, what she eats, and so on. I had no idea she ate so many snails. On Famia and her explorer kin also, I think. We cannot be sure, though. Simple Lozwug carried only this letter. I know a place where more information can be found, but you will have to go. The Dragonstar Depot in Lilmoth. I leased them the land. They were very pleased, until it sunk. Now they slop around in there like angry mudmoles. No one is welcome, least of all me. If you sneak into the depot, you may find more clues. I should tell you, the Dragonstar Dryskins are not over fond of uninvited guests.
Wait, I remember this.
I should tell you, the Dragonstar Dryskins are not... It started, yes. For Domitia? Yes. The island in the chip? Yes. As the... Ha! So you know about the remnant too. Seems that Cyrodiilic Collections just found something worthwhile. not let my lack of dancing and cheering fool you. I am very impressed. I did not think you would secure the clues we need so quickly. How did you fare in there? I see. That is unfortunate. But your honesty is sun on my scales. I will prepare the usual denials and peace offerings. The blackguards? Kayak. They are a cruel bunch. It is Deadwater make, but a Deadwater Naga would never give up a weapon willingly. Perhaps the blackguards tried to... My doubts, mine. Please let Famia know.
You're back. Excellent. Blackguards. Oh, those ill-mannered brutes are the worst kind of... Really? Goodness. I never even mentioned her before, did I? Her name is Cassandra, a wealthy antiquary.
So, this is the adventurer you mentioned, Famia. Excellent. Greetings. I am Cassandra. I regret that it's taken me so long to make your acquaintance. Very well. I do hope you will exercise caution. The blackguard. Yes, I'm familiar with Jack Sickleburn. A very blackguards. Unwelcome news, isn't it, Rotate?
Alright. Stream tomorrow.